also think one of the biggest issues in our ecosystem in Australia is that we don't think globally quick enough. We've got a thing called a mid-market crisis here, which is any country between 20 and 50 million population. It's very common to have lots of stats around this, and research has been done that quite easily you can get sucked into building a really good business which addresses a big enough problem in your country, but in the time that you've done that, someone else has done it globally.
Welcome to the Growth Cartel podcast, where real operators share their stories and form genuine connections. Dive into a world of unique narratives, practical insights, and strategies from the entrepreneurial front lines, with authentic stories of the highs and lows of success and failure with our guests. Join Brandon, Dickie, and Rhys for our first ever episode that is proudly brought to you by Petona and Four Phase Consulting.
So, but really great to get us all together. It's just three people who are really, really passionate about the Australian startup ecosystem. We've all come into it at different stages and different points in our life. And we wanted to get together and create a community and a connection platform and help sort of demystify and de-risk and tell real stories about people who have worked in the startup space and sort of demystify what startup is. Outside of, the VC-backed unicorns that everyone likes to talk about. There's a myriad of different businesses growing and scaling in this market, and we want to create a collective community of people that tell real stories and create real connections and bring real partners onto this platform and look to help grow and scale these businesses, because that's, I think, something we're all passionate about. And over time, we're going to build out and allow this anyone to come on this platform, as long as they're consistent with the mission that we're on.
Love it, Rhys. Couldn't have said it better myself, mate. Nailed it.
Yeah. And I'm a real fidget. So now starting to do podcasting, I've got to make sure I stand still. So
I'm a mover too, but I'm trying to keep my head still so you don't see all the booze that's behind my head right now.
Well, I was at Think and Grow's office yesterday. They were nice enough to let me work out of there yesterday. And it was so busy coming home last night. So Thursday is definitely the new Friday post-COVID, and there was a lot of Christmas parties on last night. So
man,
I know.
Well,
I've
yeah.
Sorry, go on, Brando.
No, I'm just going to say what you're about to, mate. I've seen you everywhere, mate. I think you've been hitting it hard.
Yeah, today's the first day that I'm going to be at home since the 27th of November. So every day there's been at least one event, including 3 interstate trips in that time. So 1 to Tassie and 2 to Sydney. I did 2 in Sydney across 5 days, which I would never recommend. That's way too much sailing on an aeroplane. And if you want to see me at my very worst, watch me when I'm sat on an aeroplane trying to get off, waiting for everyone to file themselves into the aisle, slowly grab their bags. I'm an extremely impatient person in those moments. I'm the worst version of myself, so
patience is not one of my virtues either. So
never fly with me.
Let me ask.
My family hate traveling with me, so
my family just hate me. No, that's a joke. Let me ask the two of you, right? So obviously we are back to some form of normality when it comes to physical events, face-to-face, pitch events, conferences, the acceptance of kind of traveling around and doing things in person. And I would assume the two of you are kind of pretty, subscribed to the whole idea of collaborating in person, being in an office as much as you can. Not to say you discount working from home, but if you had to bottle down, each of you, the key difference or advantage to this in-person element, especially with regards to networking and events. I mean, I got my own views, but I'd love to hear you guys talk about why you think it can be so, superior.
I can jump in first. Firstly, mate, I want to say I think we're in an accelerated norm right now. I feel like it's even more. There's even more activity than there was pre-COVID. I think people have absolutely just gone, we missed this. We missed 2 years of it. Let's just double down, supercharge, accelerate all the physical events. I, for one, know that it's been a crazy year for that. And I feel like people are hobbling to the finish line this year more than they ever have been, because we've lost that balance a little bit, Having said that, I'm a massive, massive advocate for the in-person connection. I don't think you can actually quite replicate that. So many platforms have tried. I was one of those people who was hosting. So back in during lockdown, I worked for a entertainment company, and we had to pivot and put all our products online. So I was hosting virtual trivia nights for hundreds of people, and um, office Olympic games from home, and all these things, trying to, I guess, create that connection. What was that? We got delivery.
Oh, is that a knock on the door Christmas time, boys? I'm sorry, earlier post.
I love it. It's a hamper coming your way. I'll go again. Yeah, so I was working for a company that literally did that, right? It was like, how do we create physical connection and try to put it on online on Zoom and other platforms? And look, it was needs must in the moment, right? I just don't think you can actually quite do that. I think digital's and remote's still good for content. If you want to sit there and learn about something on a workshop, fantastic. It's good for national, especially in a country like Australia where we're so big and it's so hard to get everywhere. But it's just not engaging. And for me personally, I got Zoom fatigue and I haven't recovered from that. Like I still get to the point now, if I jump in on a webinar, I'm doing something in the background. I'm probably doing work as I'm listening to what someone's talking about, whereas you just cannot replicate that for me personally. And so being in a room, it brings you present in the moment. There's so much in terms of that kind of physical, I guess, energy you get from people, and and you just cannot replicate that online for me. So I think physical events are so important. There's got to be a balance somewhere, and so I think next year I'm definitely conscious that I'm going to try to scale down my events calendar, just to avoid this kind of December burnout that I feel like everyone's currently in.
Yeah, I think everyone's definitely stumbling to the finish line this year, and I'm very much looking forward to the end of next week and trying to disconnect and have a sort of bit of a digital detox. But I mean, I tend to agree, and it's my opinion, but I think most of the really creative, valuable magic happens when you're face to face. There are certain aspects of any job that can be done remotely, and I think it's all about having that correct balance. I think it went from pre-COVID, which was very much in the office, feet under the desk, which I didn't necessarily subscribe to. And then it went, fully remote. And I think we need to move back into this hybrid model where people get better flexibility, they get better life balance. But I certainly believe there should be some expectation within reason. There's always outliers for whatever it might be, that you try and get everyone face to face, on a regular basis, whether it be, doing 2 and 3, 3 and 2, whether it be, once a month, once a quarter, but just getting, your core team together, the core people, you're building that rapport, you're building, face-to-face relationships, breaking down, communication barriers, all those types of things. And I know certainly having just exited my own startup, I think it would have been incredibly difficult to, create a business from nothing, doing that, 100% remotely. And I know that there's businesses that have done it that way, and I admire them, but it's certainly, it's not the environment that I don't think would bring out my best in terms of, being creative and trying to create new products and innovate and do all those types of things.
No, I hate the word networking, right? I'm trying to kill that word and create something completely different. I like to call it building a network over networking. And so, but I still think if we're going to use that phrase, I host a lot of events. I think this year I've done something like 22 pitch nights, either as a judge or as an MC. And for me, the best value in those often is when I look across the room and see that flurry of conversation during the intervals where everyone's sort of connecting and thinking, right, what magic has been done here and what, I guess, value is going to come from that. You can't do that online, right? You can try to put people into breakout rooms and create that, but the reality is one person talks at a time. There's this kind of awkward who's going to go next, and then the people who are less kind of, I guess, less loud and less sociable will speak less. It's really hard to get them involved in the conversation. It's so much easier to be able to bounce through and have this huge kind of group, I guess, collaborative piece in person at events that you just can't do.
Yeah, that sort of makes me think. I was just going to say that makes me think back to probably 5 years ago. I had a role at an incubator, and it was in Geelong where I live, but it also had a presence in Ballarat, which is a smaller town again, and then in Gippsland and Warrnambool and Wangaratta. And it's still to this day, I don't feel like we've fully solved the issue of the isolated entrepreneur, or the regional, or that entrepreneur that maybe possesses similar traits and needs and wants, but just through the tyranny of distance is limited to being able to access this face-to-face element, even though they wish to. And we even went to the point of trying to launch a platform that would virtually connect them better and match make them with what they needed, but it still didn't solve the physical element. And it's more a statement rather than I don't have the answer, but it's still something I really look forward to trying to contribute to helping, because I don't know about you guys, but some of the best entrepreneurs I've met are often from regional or smaller communities where they've just literally set out to solve a problem, whether it be in an agricultural or farming setting, or manufacturing, but they've literally done it the way that it's spoken to be done, which is just solve a real world problem at your fingertips. But then they sort of run into that wall of either not being able to find a running mate, like a co-founder, or a community. And I don't know how they fix that.
There is undoubtedly less infrastructure outside of Sydney and Melbourne. Even if we're talking about the ecosystems, even getting down to Brisbane and southeast Queensland, it drops off enormously, right? So I was in Tasmania 2 weeks ago, doing a bit of a scouting mission as to what was there in terms of infrastructure and community. And look, there's green shoots, but the reality is you're talking to founders there who are looking to go elsewhere because they don't have enough support. There's not enough support from government. There's not enough access to grants, resources, like-minded people, so they're talking about where they can go either interstate or out of the country. And then, the worst case scenario there is we lose a big potential positive for our economy and for the Tasmanian economy, if you look at it at that micro level. So totally agree, mate. And that's a common problem across the whole country, in my opinion. Beyond the two major cities.
Rhys, do you reckon it's more specific to a country like Australia that's, relatively small in population, but highly dispersed, and doesn't sort of possess the luxury like America, where they've got, 50 states, they've got 30 of these satellite cities that have populations of a couple of million, and they're big enough to sustain their own thing, but they're very different and separate enough to everywhere else. Whereas, like Dickie said, we've got like these two kind of cities, and then there's slight years between the rest.
Yeah, definitely. We have this huge amount of concentration of resources, population, talent, infrastructure, money. Really, it was almost just Sydney probably 10 years ago. Melbourne has become quite a hub. Southeast Queensland and Brisbane, they're pushing hard, but it is something that we need to try and solve, because there's so many great places that you can live in Australia. And I come from someone who, until high school, grew up, 40 minutes outside of Mildura in a town of 1,100 people. So, how can we make these satellite areas in Australia, and even pushing out to Adelaide and Perth and Darwin and Alice Springs and places like that. How do we help entrepreneurs in those areas get access to resources, talent, platforms to try and start businesses there, because there is so much talent. And they're, as I said, I grew up in one of these places. They're great places to live, and it was an amazing place to grow up as a young child on a farm. It's unforgettable experience.
I live in Geelong, and that's well known as being the fastest growing regional city, and especially throughout COVID. And obviously there was a myriad of reasons why people in major cities were drawn to somewhere more country-esque. But as we've seen a little bit with immigration, right? How there's elements of immigration that are more accessible and friendly if you were to go and reside in a town or city that's labelled as country or regional. I wonder, it's probably not as simple as saying to a business you have to be incorporated or you have to be based physically at an address, but it's almost like that might be something that could help.
Like regional entrepreneurship grants, ultimately. So if you set your business up in a certain area, I mean, that's happening. I have some issues with that. I think for me, some of the solutions need to be private, and they need to also be national solutions. The problem we have here a lot of times is a lot of the funding comes from state government, right? Ultimately, and that what that creates is what you're talking about now. We're kind of seeing already between the state governments in terms of, right, Queensland have got a new grant. Let's get offshore interstate attraction from entrepreneurs. So some of the Tasmanian founders that I was just talking about were saying to me, we're going to go to Queensland because we know we can get there, and we're an ag tech business, and we can get a 100K grant to kick us off, or to accelerate our growth. And look, I think competition in any market is good, but I don't think it solves that problem at a national level. That sort of grant is a great idea if it's federal, but if it's national, I think we get to the point where, interstate, I think we get to that point where there's this like what we have now, which is basically completely separate ecosystems that don't really work together. It's almost like driving, right? Like people come from the UK to Australia and can't believe that we've got different laws across each state. It's the same thing in the startup world. The funding streams are just ridiculous, and so I think I always I think government's always the best solution to a lot of our problems, but I always try not to lean back on that as the only solution, right? Because I think that's a big issue.
Yeah. And I think maybe not so, maybe in the US, but I know in certainly, say, somewhere like Europe, it's a lot easier to have a really remote team because their public transport system is so good. Having worked for Volkswagen for years, I mean, I was just outside of Wolfsburg. I jump on a train, I'm in Berlin in an hour and a half, 2 hours. If we had a fast train between Melbourne and Sydney, you could live in Albury, and if it took you an hour to get to Melbourne, you could come down for a meeting during the day, or a board meeting or a team meeting. But at the moment, we just don't have any of that infrastructure. Now, that's an enormous problem to solve. But if we want to break down this tyranny of distance that we have in Australia, it will take first principle thinking and breaking down some of those barriers and making people in regional areas more accessible. I mean, Brandon, I surf. If you told me that I could live in Torquay or Coffs Harbour or, the dream is, northern New South Wales, I'd be the first one on the train or the bus.
Rhys, without sounding hypocritical here, we have gone full circle, and really there is a solution to this problem, which is a more digital, way of working. Ultimately, that is the solution. But we're all so passionate about, I guess, what in person brings.
Yeah,
that we're kind of to that almost.
Yeah, I think the in-person is inescapable, especially at the beginning, I think, of a business or the relationship with the team. And what's coming to my mind is if you've got these amazing problem-solving entrepreneurial type people in the country or in the regions that are so close to a problem that needs to be solved and they're going for it, but ultimately they probably need not necessarily a running mate, but they need someone to complement them. And the reality is a really talented tech person is probably not going to exist in that region. So I think it speaks to more being able to better matchmake those 2 to 3, those teams, right? And then, I guess being able to allow them to be able to conduct their business in a way where it's not completely isolated, but there's at least that, I don't know, I think you need to know that you're going to work with someone and you're going to match well and it's going to last and it's going to line up. And also like how cool would it be if amazing tech talent and people who really want to maybe go again as a founder could actually discover where problems already exist through people in these communities, and they could choose to go, you know what, I want to go and do that one. And then there's this, it's almost like a road show or an element where they get sent there to immerse and meet. And I think that'd be such a cool little grant program or, facilitation of skills and matching up. I'm just going to say, boys, we produce so much food and more than we need, and we are agriculturally strong. And yes, we're good at disability and helping people in those scenarios, and we spend a lot of money on it. But, we have a lot of natural resources. It makes sense that we should go and exploit further how to commercialize problems that exist in like an agricultural and a food techie kind of scenario, because that would apply easily to a global market.
Yeah, and Yeah, go Dickie.
No, they've just sorry. I was gonna say they're just launching, or they've recently launched. It's definitely exists now. I think it's called Australia's Economic Accelerator, which is basically a $100 million program. Don't quote me on this. Which is really about taking sort of 8 kind of key focus areas, and a lot of those are still things like exporting natural resource and food and loads of different things, forestry and fishing. And so not necessarily all just tech and innovation, which is a bit of an issue in itself for me personally, but this is a program that's meant to be about driving the export potential of Australia more. Because there's loads of recent stats around how far behind we're falling in terms of our export market. The issue probably is it's probably too small and too slow, and we're still going to naturally fall behind other countries that are doing the same thing because of
Well, it's and it's like what you said before. You should always and there's no sort of one size fits all. I should say that I have worked and hired people that have been completely remote, and I've never actually met face to face, and we made it work, and they were fantastic resources to have in our business. So I mean, it can work, but at the same time, there's a reason that so much innovation in terms of tech comes out of Silicon Valley, comes out of Tel Aviv, because it's the concentration of talent that all get together, all get face to face, and that's where the magic happens. Now, tech's different because tech, you can do that anywhere. But in terms of Australia and where we can look at innovation, I mean, we're talking about forestry, farming, fishing, mining, all things that, we should be at the forefront of innovation on. The converse is true there. You need to get the talent as close to the problem they're solving as possible. So when you're talking about ag tech, I think it would be difficult to have a whole heap of people sitting in a tower in Melbourne or Sydney trying to solve, an ag tech problem. You want to try and get those people as close to the problem as you can, and that's where investing outside of these huge concentration of population is something that needs to be looked at.
So let me ask you guys. So my thoughts on this are, when encouraging an early stage entrepreneur to go deep on solving a problem, and not really thinking much further forward beyond just really trying to tackle and solve that problem. I actually don't care if that founder doesn't even consider whether the solution to that problem can be applicable globally, and whether that's going to be a really big addressable market and opportunity. Because I personally think that's just too early of a distraction to have. But a lot of the advice I see founders get given is, oh, look, if you're going to solve a problem and build a product and try and have a business, you must consider from day one a global view, and if it's able to be sold and distributed globally in order for you to realize its full potential. And straight away, I understand that, yes, that focus may need to be considered, but straight away, that now makes a founder think, oh, hang on, I've got to prioritize now solving my problem and having a business that has a story that can address being global. And I just personally think that is too much of a distraction and pressure to put on yourself when there's so much effort and work that needs to go into just the first thing, which is solve the problem.
I mean, that's a venture narrative, right? So that's a narrative that's backed, or at least it's spawned out of venture capital funds that are looking for 100x return on an investment. Therefore, they want to create a narrative where your business should be trying to achieve that, should be tackling a big enough problem, a big enough addressable market, a global market, that's going to get that ultimate return for them, so they can, obviously make profit and sustain the fund. So I agree. Having said that, I also think one of the biggest issues in our ecosystem in Australia is that we don't think globally quick enough. We've got a thing called a mid-market crisis here, which is any country between 20 and 50 million population. It's very common to have lots of stats around this, and research has been done that quite easily you can get sucked into building a really good business which addresses a big enough problem in your country, but in the time that you've done that, someone else has done it globally, and it's almost impossible for you to kind of scale your business. Again, this obviously is thinking at that high level of, I guess, things that help the Australian economy. Now, I'm not saying as a founder, that's absolutely fine if you build a business which you think is big enough for you and it achieves the goals that you want to achieve. But in terms of Australia's economy, it really hampers us, because if you come from a country like, say, New Zealand, where you've got 5 million people, you're more likely to build to scale straight away because you don't think your business, your market is big enough to to build a good enough business. Israel's a great example of that. Like they way outperform their population because everyone thinks global from day one. So I think it's really about, I guess, for the entrepreneur, what they want to achieve, which is fine. But from a economic, I guess, country perspective, that is a good bit of advice to give, I guess, in terms of helping to drive our innovation economy.
And, have 100 million. It can be a physical product business. It can be a services business. It can be, a SaaS tech business. But you do need to, and it's a great point, you do need to think, okay, I can reach scale in this market, but if this is a good idea and it has a global potential, you do want to think offshore from day one, because there's so much bigger markets. I mean, someone will pick up on it in Europe or the US, and once they get their market share or traction in that market, they're likely to come in and just cannibalize you. So you do need to balance, like, what is the product I'm selling? Yes, I might be able to own my home market, but how do I know that someone might take this idea, deploy it in a much bigger market, get more capital, more resources, and then come back into my market and eat my lunch?
Well, I can guarantee through my little slither of experience, there's never been a shortage of overseas businesses looking to what Australian founders and entrepreneurs are doing and problems they're trying to solve. I think we are very good at that. Commercializing, yeah, I think definitely, to your point, guys, yes, I'm sort of a bit more sold now on the fact that, yeah, we need to, I guess, consider, can it work globally? Obviously it's easy to answer the question around, hey, can my widget be sold all across the Western world? Well, yes, but then can it work? So quickly answering, has it been done already? What are the competitors like? Is it defendable? Yes, I agree with that. Because there's never been a shortage of people looking to our abilities in our tech. I think, that's something we can hang our hat on, punching above our weight on. So like a first little crack in episode, how do you think we're going, guys?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Well, you think we're going all right?
Yeah, I think it's been good. I mean, yeah, I think it's been really good. It's been a good little chat. I think, like, for considering no little I think I said to you, this would be a great episode to talk about. I'd love to deep dive into this more, what we've just been talking about. And if I could, if I knew in advance, I'd have all my little stats with me so I could get them absolutely nailed. But I think it's a really interesting topic.
Well, that's what we're going to hold you to, Dickie. We're going to, for everyone listening, we're going to get him to bring his stats and his quotes. And Rhys, I know you like that kind of stuff, so we'll dive deep. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, we're going to dive into a lot, hopefully in the new year. Certainly in and around the Australian scale up challenges that we have. I'm immersing myself in AI and AI adoption and what that's going to be able to do in an economy like Australia, where we're relatively speaking high cost, low productivity. So what are what can be done there, and how can founders and teams deploy product faster using these tools. And there's lots and lots of stuff. I know a lot of people have reached out to me already and said, love the idea of the growth cartel, would love to come on and tell stories and around the various challenges and failures and what do we call it, F-ups and successes being in and around the startup ecosystem.
Well, with that, why don't we finish on what's been the biggest I guess lesson or piece of growth that stuck with you, for this year? I can go first if you want me to.
Oh, please. Well volunteered, mate.
Well, for me, it would be, detaching from my ego a little bit and knowing when to sort of make the call to transition out of being a founder in my own business operationally. So, there's the little fella. There's Rhys, this little fella.
Hello, mate.
Little Batman.
Yeah, for me, it would absolutely be like going through the pain of learning how to detach a bit and sort of know that timing-wise right now, stepping away from being a founder and that responsibility in a business and it being able to continue without me, but sort of making that hard decision, because it's difficult for founders when they've put their heart and soul into something and, a lot of other people around them have sort of backed them and put time and effort in as well. And it's not an easy thing to do. So I think the biggest growth lesson for me was sort of, tackling that and handling that properly, to be able to springboard into something else and sort of, see it as a real learning experience and something that's helped. But I can assure you, and I'm sure people who would see or watch this would identify that, moving on or not breaking up, but sort of, detaching from one thing and going to another season. It's not easy. Yeah.
No, it's definitely not, mate. For me, it's been a real year of just understanding my voice and how to use it best for good, and I guess drive impact and understand kind of actually, having some influence in this ecosystem and making sure that I kind of use it. I actually did a 4-hour leadership workshop yesterday with a good friend of mine who runs basically like immersion therapy for leaders, which was around about like you do loads of psychometrics. They tell you your good things and your bad things. The bad things are pretty intense. It's basically like a 4-hour therapy session, and then afterwards you come away and you know what your special sauce is, and you know kind of how to, I guess, best use that for what you want to achieve in life. So woke up this morning feeling very reflective after kind of 4 hours locked in a room getting therapy about my professional skills. So yeah, it's been a huge year of growth in that respect, I guess. And also using kind of what I do in this industry. I feel like a lot of times it is a mirror that people put on you. We talk about founders and why they do what they're doing and why the problem's something that they're wedded to. And I think it's the same for operators. And so for me this year, I've really, gone through a lot of personal stuff through just my work life, I guess, understanding who I am, which has been really good.
Love it, mate. Hendo.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a big year for me too. I exited my startup. It was an amazing experience. My co-founders continue on with it, and they're still kicking goals and going great guns. But it was a time for me to take some time for myself and think and reflect about what I wanted to do next. And I'm really passionate and really enjoy and really get drive out of working with earlier stage growth and scale businesses. So, the last few months I've lent, right into that. Part of this concept that we've put together is paying back or paying forward in this space. So a little bit like both of you, I've had a year of reflection. What do I want to do, I guess, in the second half of my professional career? Like I said, just leaning fully into continuing to stay in this scale and growth stage, particularly in Australia, and doing everything I can to help grow these businesses. So, I've got a goal that, within the new economy, I want to work with businesses to create a certain amount of jobs, and perhaps I'll put a big hairy target around that next year that we can talk about on this platform as well. And set myself a huge goal, and really, really excited about 2024.
Love it. Well, that's episode 2 or episode 1.1.
Thanks for listening to the inaugural episode of the Growth Cartel, brought to you by Petona and Four-Phase Consulting. Please support us by liking, subscribing, and sharing our content. And our next episode will be landing soon.